Hey everybody, this is a battery operated, and you can also plug it into the wall, AC operated portable radio. So this guy is he's an RCA Victor, and he is kind of like one of the earliest portable radios that, if you think about it, was kind of like uh, intended to play rock and roll. I think by this time, RCA might have had Elvis Presley on their rolls and stuff like that, and so this is kind of the first consumer radio that was intended for kids, because it's kind of like bright, cool colors, and it was kind of like, this is maybe possibly one of the first things that was bought with the consumer, with the ability to buy stuff, as maybe some of the first boomer kids were starting to have disposable income because of how good the economy was in the United States of America. So this, I don't know, I could be wrong. That's just kind of like my take on things. Is this is just one of the first radios that's a portable radio that you could bring with you to the beach, and you didn't have to plug it in. There are many other portable radios that came before this guy. So this is an earlier battery operated portable radio. It's pretty big, and it's pretty heavy. And so this was made by Zenith. This particular guy was made, I think, in the 1940 to 40, 39 to 40, 41, something like that. This thing was actually made before, I guess, and into World War II. Maybe they stopped during World War II. Actually, I don't think they stopped during World War II. But this radio was developed by the commander, who was a high-up guy in Zenith. This is one of the first. It's not the first at all portable radio. There were portable radios going back to the 30s and I think even the 20s that are crazy. They look crazy and they're humongous. This thing is pretty big and pretty heavy, but it's kind of like one of the first radios that you could bring along with you in a car or on a train or, say, in the Empire State Building. And the thing about those is as industrialization and progress, or however you want to call it, in the United States was going on more and more, these buildings had steel girders in them. It wasn't all wood, it was steel. And cars, the body of the car is steel, and the outer parts of a train had a lot of metal in them as well. So they wanted to make a portable radio that really would work, because they had portable radios before these, but the problem was receiving signals in an inhospitable environment, which is you're surrounded by metal. So this is one of the first radios that really did work that well. And also, a lot of radio collectors are familiar with the transoceanic radio, which had shortwave, and you could pick up amateur radio bands and shortwave and all that stuff, as well as AM. And so this is kind of like the little sister of the transoceanic in a way. And I guess I'll get into that later, or maybe not, if I forget. But anyway, these guys are awesome because
But are made over a few weeks using
With only a $7 million budget, Purple Rain went on to gross over $75 million worldwide. The film also won an Academy Award for Best Original Song Score and was added to the National Film Registry by the.
So these radios are pretty cool. I'm obsessed with them. Oh, that's the dog. That's the bug. She likes to bark at squirrels. Who doesn't like to bark at squirrels, right? Oh, there she goes. That's the bug. She's a rescue dog. She had some birth defects, and we got her from the rescue shelter, and she's awesome. And she loves squirrels. So yeah, so these were some of the first radios that could work inside a steel building or in the new, more radio inhospitable environments of post-industrial revolution, especially in big cities, cars, trains, stuff like that. Some of these, this door is captive. I think it's the very early ones, the door is captive. So it doesn't come off, you can't take the door off. But most of these wave magnets, you can take the door off, which is a blessing and a curse, because a lot of times they're missing. But who cares? Let me see about this one. A lot of these wave magnets actually, it's disabled in this one, but there's a little orange flag that comes up in the bottom of the radio dial and tells you that it's on, because you would buy batteries at the store. You'd buy them at the drugstore or hardware store or a department store or farm supply store or whatever, and the batteries were enormous. So the batteries were this entire area. So the chassis, the bottom of the radio, ends about right there. And the rest of it was all battery. So nowadays, it's a lot easier. Basically what I do is, this is my daily driver wave magnet. And so with the wave magnets, they had a switch, and the switch was in the chassis. So when you jam this plug in, it actually slides. There's a slide switch in there, and when you jam the plug in, it switches the radio from AC to DC. So this tube right here is the rectifier tube 117Z6. And so with tubes, that first number in a tube is actually the amount of volts that the tube eats up. So the rest of these tubes are start with the number 1. So they all eat up 1 volt. So these tubes were all developed. There's another 117 volt guy right there for the rectifier. So that's the first tube, I guess, that the electricity goes through. So it's getting rectified, and it actually eats up all of the electricity, because some of your common all-American sets. So a lot of your common AA5 sets, All-American 5, which is this really standard lineup of tubes, all those sets are designed to eat up about 117, 110, 120 volts. I guess that one is an AA4, but this one might be an AA4 too, and you can see that the leather handle is still intact, which is kind of crazy. These were usually the radios that would appear for comparison of size. That's a D-cell battery, so look at how small and cute that radio is. This thing is adorable. The little fabric in the speaker area, and this little sort of Art Deco dial where the knob is just screwed directly onto the tuner shaft. There's no string or additional needle. Actually, this one is the same way too. There's a little, people like to call them chicken head knobs. There's a little chicken head knob. Silver tone was the Sears. So Sears contracted other radio manufacturers to make their radios. And then here's Packard Bell. And actually the other night, my sweetie and I were watching a Alfred Hitchcock movie called I can't remember what it was, but it was about this guy, and he comes back to his old family, and he's reunited with his niece, and actually it turns out he's a killer. But there's one scene in the movie where the niece is in her bedroom and she's next to a Packard Bell radio, and all the Packard Bell radios, as far as I know, were stationized, which means that if you bought one of these Packard Bell radios, I don't know if they all were, but if you bought one of these old radios, when you bought one of these radios new, it gave you a list of all the radio stations. And so there's KGO, so I'm right here in Oakland. So KGO is the closest 50,000 watt radio station. Used to be a great sort of like community radio station that everybody would call. They would call in when there was an earthquake, because they had news and they had weather and they had nonsense like Coast to Coast, which I love, but it's also nonsense. Oh, KGO used to be a great kind of like community radio station, but I don't know who owns it now, but they destroyed it, and now it has something to do with online gambling. So they talk about sports and online gambling all the time, which is totally un-American in my view. Anyway, I don't know if you think like AM radio is even worse than it used to be. You can put some comments in the comment area below. But I do know that actually there's a bipartisan congressional bill that's trying to keep AM radio in cars, because Teslas, you buy a Tesla, it does not have an AM radio in it. And I actually firmly believe that AM radio is the last line of defense if something really big happens, if there's if somebody bombs us or something like that. So with the whole stationized thing, as you can see, is for California, so it's west of the Rockies. So all the radio stations west of the Rockies, mostly, start with K, and then everything east of the Rockies, I think, starts with a W. That's what I think, anyway. But, so, KGO is up here in San Francisco, and then there's big news station KNX, which is down in LA, and I think Shango 066 is, if you're watching this video, you know who that guy is, because he's amazing. He's like my hero. So, anyway, he's super close to KNX, so, and I think KNX is another 50,000 watt station, which is a very strong station, so KNX comes through like gangbusters for him. Anyway, so the thing is in the middle of the night, or kind of like a little bit after the sun sets, I can hear KNX. So if everything were blown off the face of the earth and KNX were still on the air, we could hear KNX up here from Oakland, and maybe vice versa. I think they might be able to hear KCBS is the actual useful news radio station here, because KGO is a piece of garbage now. Anyway, yeah, that's I don't even know if that's a rant. Turns out I talk a lot. I've been watching YouTubers and thinking, geez, these people talk a lot, and now I start a video and geez, I'm just talking and talking. Oh yeah, check out this cool handle. It's like spring-loaded. I don't know if this handle is made out of Bakelite or if it's made out of plastic. Anyway, that's pretty neat. The wave magnet radios could operate inside a steel building or a airplane or a car, but they couldn't. The radio waves can't see through the metal. Like, there still aren't very many radios that can do that, or any at all. But so what they did was they came up with this cool design These are long since dried up, but these are real rubber plungers. So the deal was, this is all the way that it came. We're currently looking at the model 5G 500M H or something. I don't know. They kept on changing the design a little bit. I'm a weirdo, so what I do is I go onto this website. I'll put the website up, and it's just an amazing website. So I print out, I don't know why I printed it out so big, but I'll print out the schematic, and then I stick the schematic in the radio in case I'm somewhere. And yeah, I don't know why I do that. I'm weird, but it's fun to do. Anyway, so I always stick the schematic in there, and then so this is how it originally came from the factory. And so this is the wave magnet, and for marketing purposes, they made it in the shape of a magnet, but it's just a big loop. So what you're doing is you have a true AA5 radio with a cool loop. Look at those graphics. Look at that power. This thing is so rad. So not a lot of people really care about these radios, but I've been obsessed with them because I grew up with one. I had one that I got at a yard sale. No, I got it at a flea market in Cape Cod in the mid-1980s when I was a little kid, and lugged it around, and I actually brought it everywhere with me until college. It died in college because I hooked the antenna wire up to a steel roof in my dorm. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yep. Here's the wave magnet. So what one would do was you could get your aerial or your antenna, you could get it outside of the confines of the metal car or train or skyscraper by sticking this on the window. So you'd put that guy up in the window, and then you could listen to the radio. And so this is a wave magnet. I have so many of these. I got a whole bunch of them, and they were all kind of basket cases, but I've been obsessed with them so long that I had a number of parts wave magnets. Somebody had their way with this one, and there's this three-way switch that has something to do with how the antenna works. All the radios have had those in there, and I've never seen much of a difference one way or the other, but I've always operated them in pretty good conditions. And so, yeah, all these radios, I would recap them, replace all the capacitors. Sometimes the high-powered capacitors, like the 117-volt capacitors, were okay, and I would let them go for a while. But so I don't know, some people don't believe in that, but that's what I did for a while. I have like a arsenal of spare tubes. So this is my daily driver. So I bring this guy to the beach, and here's the power supply. So there's two different needs. This radio needs two different types of power. They used to call it A battery and B battery. And so the B battery is high voltage, low amperage, and the A battery is a little more high amperage and low voltage. So if you go to the original schematic, that is what the plug used to look like. So that's what the plug used to look like. So you can see blue is B plus, yellow is B minus, and then red is A plus, and black is A minus. So I think, yeah, I was trying to keep the colors correct, but I kept them as close as I could, but it was just the wire that I had lying around. So this is the A battery, which heats the A battery, puts electricity to the heaters in the tubes. So when you turn on a tube, you see a little orange glow in there, and that's the heater that's working in the tube that helps to excite the electrons so the tube can do its thing. These little 1-volt tubes, you typically don't see a heater. Sometimes you see a little bit of a heater in one of the audio output tubes, which is sometimes a little higher voltage, but usually these guys are also another scourge of the radio collector community most people hate. These are called loctal tubes. So the term originated with octal tubes, which meant that the tube had 8 pins in it. So this tube is an octal tube, which most people like. Most people like the octal tubes because they play nice and they work well, and a lot of guitar amplifiers and all kinds of stuff, TVs, everything had octal tubes, which means that it can have a maximum of 8 pins. But the rest of the tubes are loctal, which is they also have 8 pins, but they lock in, sort of like a World War II thing, I think, or a car radio thing. So I think that this radio is 1939, so I think that this radio even came out before World War II. But see, there's a little ridge in the bottom of that big splinky that's sticking out of the bottom, and so it holds the tube in. So you still, like with all the other kinds of tubes, you got to rotate it until you feel the keyway. There's a little keyway there, just like octal tubes and other types of tubes. There's a little keyway, so you got to line him up. And then, oops, did I line him up? I don't know. Line him up, and then he pops in. So they're designed to be operated upside down or whatever. I think it began life as a car radio thing. B plus is 90 volts, and A plus is 9 volts. So these are nice Signature Select, only the best batteries, Safeway batteries. So to make 9 volts, I have 6 1.5 volt batteries, and that's for the heaters. And then for the B plus, I've got enough batteries to kind of make up about 90 volts. You can test once you do this. See, this is just one 9-volt battery plugged into the next, sort of daisy chained along, and then it adds up to 90 volts, and I just got it duct taped together. And then I make a little jig. I make a little setup with 9-volt battery connectors. Here's a 9-volt battery connector with just the negative wire remaining, and then here's a 9-volt battery connector with just the positive wire remaining. And a lot of times the original wires in these radios, especially the blue ones for some reason, whatever, but they're in Zenith, they are made of real rubber, and so the rubber cracks and comes off, so I have to put new wires on there. So yeah, I have many of these wave magnets because I was obsessed with them for many years, and I would bring this thing to the beach. I would also play my phone through it. So I would just put my phone on. I'd play MP3s with my phone and just put it on repeat on a mix, and then just stick it in the back of the wave magnet, and then just go to the beach, and it would play all day. Like this setup with the batteries that I have. With moderate use, it'll last for a years. You know, it'll last a really long time. But oh yeah, like I was saying, the original battery was this whole area. That whole area under the chassis was one huge battery that just slid right in there. And with the first wave magnet that I had when I was a kid, I couldn't get the battery out because it kind of puffed out a little bit. I didn't really understand what was going on, and it was only until college that I realized that it was a dead battery. That's how little I knew. And kind of chewed away at it with a screwdriver and was able to pull it out. So, yeah, so for a lot of my childhood, I would carry this radio around and go sleep over at my grandparents' house and listen to DX, long distance AM radio at night, because I grew up out in the country in upstate New York. So there were no really strong local radio stations, which meant that you could listen at night to a good DX, good long distance AM radio, and I'd listen to all the radio stations: Chicago, Pittsburgh, New York City, all those radio stations out there. And even you could even listen, when I was a little kid, you can even listen to a lot of little or low powered stations that were like little local community stations that would even be 100 miles away. Like, I couldn't get Albany, but I could get beyond Albany, and other stations like that. Especially in the middle of the night, they'd play really local ads, like an ad for a funeral home or a plumbing company or a florist or something like that. And it was just sort of interesting to lie in bed all snuggled up in the middle of the winter and imagine what those places were like, because they were towns and cities in the Northeast that I had never heard of, and that was kind of fun. So this is not it, but this is exactly what the radio looked like that I had when I was a little kid, and it's the next generation of wave magnet. So it's the chassis. I think the chassis is the same. It's got the same chassis as this guy. This is the This is the. I think that one maybe ended in 1940, and this may be like 41, 42, 1941, 1942, and so start seeing some common parts with the transoceanics. Not really, but I mean, when I was a little kid, the radio that I had, this string was missing so much that I just didn't even understand. I didn't even know what it was supposed to be. But then later on, eBay came around, and I started hitting more yard sales, and I started getting other ones, and then I realized this was a boat. And so if you're a transoceanic person, of course, you know that there's maybe 1942 or something, the transoceanic radio had a boat, but then it also had a bomber, B-17 bomber. I don't know what number bomber it was supposed to be, but it was a bomber because it was wartime. 1942 was World War II, of course. So they're gearing up for World War II, and so they wanted to have some patriotism reflected in their products. Here you can see, this is off, but I think I've probably disabled all of these little guys, but they, because it makes it super hard to turn the knob. But you can see it changes a little bit. It's supposed to go away altogether, but so when the radio's off, that little area would go black, and then the radio's on, the little area would go orange, because you wouldn't want to turn the radio way down and then fall asleep and then sleep through the night and then waste your battery, because it was super expensive. But so yeah, these two radios would have had covers as well, but they're long gone, because these are some pretty beat up ones that I got at the Alameda Antiques Flea Market, and they're usually like sell for $25, $35 or something like that, because they're pretty beat up. But even when they're beat up at any point, like, I just think they're adorable, and it sort of like becomes like classic cars and vintage guitars and basses and stuff have patina, and with guitars it's called relicking, but it's just a sign of how long they've been around. And the crazy thing is with these radios is they generally work, which is just absolutely nonsense. I mean, it's just they have no business working. A lot of times the wiring in them is is the insulation on the wiring is pretty crinkly, and stuff like that. But a lot of times, if you just plug them in and power them right up, they will work. They might not work very well, but for something that was a portable radio, a lot of times it was a portable radio, and then they kind of got decommissioned to the garage, and then Grandpa would have them in the garage, and then they would live there. Or sometimes the really clean ones, like this guy's pretty clean one. I can't remember where I got him. I probably got him off of eBay. But the handles all went south. I have some working existing sandals, but these are just thrift store belts that basically these are pressed in, and so it looks like a nail that's got like 4 little things that go off, and they're bent out, and so you just get under there and then squeeze them a little bit, and then if you can pry gently against something in a way, wedge a flathead screwdriver under there in a way that you don't hurt it, you can pry that thing off, so you can see what I did. And this is one of the original handles. I think you can get a handle for a guitar amplifier that would probably work pretty well. But this is real leather, and they looked great. But as you can see, once leather turns the corner, you can't bring it back no matter what. It's just sort of like a living thing, and the cellular makeup in it is sort of the end of it. But I kept this one just because it's so cool to look at and see how well it was built. So this is like one of my nicer wave magnets, and the earlier ones didn't have any artwork in the speaker, and even my nicer one has got some, as you can see, the wood pulled away, so there's some ripping there. Oop. And then when you close it, you can tell. Probably, I don't know what was going on here. Maybe somebody was like feasting on it. I don't know what the heck was going on there. But, or maybe it was riding in a car or a truck and bouncing around with a bunch of other stuff, and it wore through it. I can't imagine. I don't think I did that. I've done some damage in my day to stuff, but I didn't do that. And then look at the little sort of like fleur-de-lis. I don't know what the heck that is, but you know, the little styling things in these radios is just so cool. Looks like something that Great Gatsby would wander around with during a party, drinking mint juleps. Of course, it's newer era than that, but anytime I see one at a flea market or a yard sale, I have to get it, because radio collectors aren't like super stoked about these. But as you can tell, I'm obsessed with them. This is my older daily driver, or it's actually newer than the other one. But this was my daily driver for many years, and you can see there's more belt repair. You know, I'm clearly not trying too hard, but this thing, the whole idea was to incorporate it in my daily life and to daily drive it. Just like, I don't know, some people have a philosophy where they daily drive a classic car or something like that. I just wanted to see how I could really use it in my everyday life. So this thing is, let's see if it even works. I'm not even sure.
40 to 70% versus traditional grocery stores.
A new TV? That's a lot of time in front of one TV. So why not get one of the best sets for the next 7 years? Like one of the top-rated Samsung, LG, or Sony models.
Older, and I'm concerned about how they view this world.
The number of juvenile offenders quadrupled during the first 3 months of this year.
After what appeared to be a playful debate on the Capitol steps in Washington, D.C., between Black Congressman Jamal Bowman and Marjorie Taylor Greene, she went on TV the next day and said she felt threatened.
Looking in the back of this guy. So this is the next. So this guy is 41 or 1940 to 42 to 43 or something. I'm not exactly sure. And this is the previous one. So you can see there aren't that many differences, really. It's the same chassis. There are some wiring differences. You can see that the output transformer on the speaker in the slightly newer one, is mounted a slightly different way. But they're pretty interchangeable. These are pretty easy to work on. It's pretty cool because you just unplug this one plug. You can unplug the speaker. You don't even have to like unsolder the speaker or whatever. As you can see, we've got the plug plugged in there again. It's actuating the little switch in there. This is I like to keep that on 2 because it absolutely doesn't seem to matter whatsoever. You can unplug the antenna as well. You can unplug the antenna from the tuner. A lot of times, one of the problems that these guys have is that these rubber bushings go south, and then among other things, I mean, the tuning capacitor needs to remain isolated from the chassis, but also the tuning capacitor, the blades will start to hit this IF can, this intermediate frequency can. I don't know what is written there, but it's written in old guy pencil. That's me. A long time ago, I was writing the numbers of the tubes. Anyway, but yeah, these bushings go bad. I haven't actually ever had one of these tuners make contact with the chassis quite yet. I've had the blades of the tuning capacitor ground out on the IF can, and because you can see that this tuning capacitor is kind of tilted a little bit that way. When things got really bad, I would actually wedge something between it and you can see there's the big filter capacitor back there between that and that guy. But someday I should bite the bullet and do it the real way, and be an adult and see if I can find bushings, because there's contacts that go all the way through the chassis, and there's electrical connections that go all the way through the chassis, and find bushings that are the correct size that need either no modification or the least amount of modification, and then I'll share that with the world so you just know which bushings, or grommets, grommets, the correct grommet. Anyway, here's an example of what happens with the real rubber wires. See? So, and they can see a green one in there too. And everything's just kind of hanging in. And I try not to like wallop on these radios too hard, but they actually take a fair amount of punishment. Back before the pandemic, when I had some sort of life or whatever, I would actually bring them to the beach and stuff like that. It was super fun. Everybody's like, ha ha ha, do you have a Bluetooth in there? I'm like, no, I'm a big nerd, so I'm running actual tubes. Oh yeah, there's just nonsense in here that I stuck in here at some point in time, and I have no explanation for any of this stuff. I remember owning it, but I don't remember where I got it. I can't remember where any of this stuff came from. But this pen I got from a guy that I used to live. He used to be my neighbor in a. I lived in an ex-paint factory in Oakland, and his father worked in the parts department of a large LA Chrysler dealership. So he snagged this Dodge Scat Pack pen with the graphics on it and the B, the helmet. It's pretty cool. He gave it to me because I always had tons of Mopar. And I think it's actually like a felt tip pen, late 60s felt tip pen, which is like long dried up, but it'd be interesting if you could refurbish that or find another felt tip pen. Anyway, But yeah, as you can see, got these two 6-volt batteries in series, which for the A battery, which would give you 12 volts, but they're super dead. I think I found them in the trash or something like that. So when you put them in series, they're around 9 volts now, but they've been hanging on forever. These batteries were supposed to die before the beginning of the pandemic, or right at the beginning of the pandemic, and they're still okay. This is a good example of how I daisy chain them up to get sort of 90 volts. As long as you're around 90 volts. It's okay if you're a little under 90 volts too, because in a city situation, the radio is super loud even with the volume turned down all the way. I think they might have designed this that way. Designed them that way in order to make sure you never turn the radio on and then leave the volume down all the way, because again, there's a concern about running the battery down, because I'm sure they were pretty expensive, because again, they took up this entire area. They just slid out of that entire area, which is nuts. Then of course I like to keep schematics of all my daily drivers with them. Anyway, here's a schematic, and then you can see the audio output tube. In the older radio, it's 1LB4 is the audio output tube right next to the rectifier tube. Then in the subsequent generation, for whatever reason, they had a 3-volt tube, octal tube, called the 3Q5, which is the output tube. This guy. So I found, believe it or not, this is the tube that dies the most. I don't know if it's overworked or if it's gentle, or it just seems to, I seem to kill them a lot. I seem to have killed them a lot just in doing dumb things throughout the years, like I would get the A battery and B battery mixed up for some dumb reason. And then, so the first one that would go south would be the audio output tube for whatever reason. And there, you can see I've noted B battery is 90 volts, A battery is 9 volts. And as always, great source for the all these schematics of all the radios that you're messing with is Nostalgia Air. So Nostalgia Air is just a great website for free schematics, and a lot of them are up there. So anyway, on with the madness. I guess this radio. So this radio works on either AC or DC. And this particular radio either wants 67 volts, is it 67 and a half or 67 volts, something like that. 67 and a half volts for B battery, which is this craziness right here. And then the A battery is actually 3 volts. So they get the A battery from 2 D cells, which is a lot more convenient than the older kind. This is a RCA model 6BX6B, and then there's the list of the tubes. And I think this plastic had a crazy name. They figured out this kind of plastic. I can't remember what the name of this plastic is, but it's kind of got its own marketing name to it. Impact, that's it. I guess this plastic is Impact. I guess it can withstand a lot of impact. But anyway, and the ferrite loop antenna is coming out. So maybe I've got some grommets that these ones are falling apart. So I'll see if I can dig around and find some grommets, hold this antenna in. A lot of these radios are kind of unloved and uncared for. And most of the time when you find them, you'll notice that they're very low hours. They weren't actually used a lot. I don't know why. Maybe they were birthday presents for kids and the kids didn't listen to them a lot or something. I don't know. These aren't actually... I don't know if these are RCA Victor tubes. There's no branding on these little tubes. My grandfather used to call them peanut tubes. But, I don't know. I think different people have different names, and I know there's also an official name for it. But, it's basically an AA5 receiver, essentially, except there is no rectifier tube. So it's actually 4 tubes, and there's 2 IF cans, 2 intermediate frequency cans. The rectification is not done by a tube, it's done by a big a selenium rectifier, which one would usually replace that with a diode and also a resistor in series with the diode to keep the voltage down, because the selenium rectifier ate up a certain amount of energy that a diode does not. So in order to not have the radio chassis circuits getting hit with too much voltage, one would put a resistor in with the diode that replaced the selenium rectifier. But I'm not even going to deal with any of that right now. I take a different approach to these portable battery operated radios than people normally would. Normally somebody would get them to work on AC, which makes a lot of sense, and replace the big electrolytic capacitors and replace the selenium rectifier and stuff like that, do that basic stuff. But I'm just going to go at it the other way, and I'm just going to throw in some batteries and see if it works with the batteries first, just because I do it that way. Anyway, these 2 D-cell batteries right here, there's a little arrow pointing up and a little arrow pointing down. I took a little sandpaper and kind of sanded the connections. This radio is pretty good because it doesn't seem like it's had, it looks like a battery exploded in here, but it's pretty easy to get at everything and sand it. So again, I've got the Safeway Supermarket Signature Series batteries, only the best. Jam these guys in here. There's a little motorcycle racing in the background. And jam these in. So that's the A battery. And then for the B battery, which is this guy right here, I've just taped together a whole bunch of 9-volt batteries. I can't do it in the daisy chain way that we did for the wave magnets. I wonder what would happen if I ran my tongue along all those. We're not going to do it the way I did with the wave magnets, because you can daisy chain them with the wave magnets and there's enough room, but it's a lot more shallow in here, so I figure I'll just do one of those, and I'll get to work making my little rig for the B batteries. So I usually get these off of eBay or something, Evil Bay, and just make my little. You get these 9-volt battery connectors, guys. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I got 7 batteries. 7 times 9 is 56, and we want 67. But in actuality, these batteries create a little bit over 9 volts. So I don't know. It works out fine. Anyway, I'm being a little lazy, but So what? Okay, so I'm just gonna go down the line and snip these guys off and skin them. These are the same, they're not the exact ones, but they're the same kind of wire skinners that I had when I was a little kid. Of course, I've lost and rebought these 10 times over. But these wire skinners are they're the super cheap kind, and then depending on how big your conductor is inside the insulation, you want to make sure you don't cut the wire with the insulation. You can loosen that bolt up and loosen that screw up and slide it back and forth. So the farther that way you slide the screw, the larger the wire is, the conductor is inside. And now just gonna go down the line. Hope I'm doing this the right length and not too short. I think I'm doing okay. I'm going to use, I'm disconnecting them so they're going to be in series. So when you connect batteries in series, it's positive to negative to positive to negative. So you're adding up all the voltage. So as an example right here, I'd be doing one of these, connecting the positive to the negative, and then just daisy chaining it. And so what I will do is I will also use a little bit of shrink tubing on them because you don't want to burn down your radio or your house or start a little fire or anything like that, because when you get all these 9-volt batteries in series, you actually can feel a little tickle from it. You can feel a little shock, which is pretty noteworthy. Now, get some solder. Solder up these guys. guess they're all soldered up. And now I have got the shrink tubing. Just shrink tube these guys. Ouch. Hot things are hot. Okay. So just going down the line. Doing the shrink tubing. Oops, that was a little close to the end, but anyway. So now, got this mess going on here. So I'm going to get some clip leads. I'm going to get some clip leads and we can test the radio. This is my workbench right here. It's an all-weather workbench, because it's outside, and got just the basics here for radio repair, which is isolation transformer. This thing right here is called a dim bulb, where you just run the electricity to whatever radio or whatever you're working on. You run it through a light bulb and then through the radio, so you put the light bulb in series with the radio. So if you, when you fire up the radio for the first time, if the light bulb gets very bright, you know you have a short in the radio, but if you fire it up, the bulb gets kind of bright and it gets dimmer, then you know it's acting normally. This is I don't know how many volts, how many watts this is. I guess this is a 60 watt light bulb, so it's a bit much, because most All-American 5 radios, they like, I don't know, they use 35 watts, about that much. So if I had probably had a 40 watt light bulb, that would probably be the way to do it. But my bulb is a 60 watt light bulb. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but anyway, that's what I got. And then of course I've got a variac where you can control the amount of voltage. And then these two basic guys are signal tracer. So you poke around with this little guy. You can either search for radio frequency within the circuit or just straight audio. And what you would do is, when you have the radio working or trying to work, you can have the radio upside down, so you're poking at the bottom of the chassis. And then you can hear it through the signal tracer. This is a book of tube manual. So if there's any sort of tube you're using, you're reading a schematic, and you don't know what the deal is with the tube, you can read through this book and find the tube in the book. Like say 12SA7 is a very common All-American 5 octal tube. Well, that's a 35Z5, that's a rectifier tube, but this is an octal tube. And so a lot of times if you're poking around, you're trying to figure out what's going on with the radio, you would look at the plate voltage. And then you might have a schematic for your radio, and the schematic will show which pin is the plate, but you might not know which pin that is. So you can look at 12SA7, and then you can look at the diagram for it, and then you can find letter P, and then you know that that's the plate. So now you know P is 3. So you know that pin 3 is the plate. When you're going to check the plate voltage, a lot of times checking the plate voltage is what you do. And when you are looking at a radio chassis, and you look at the tube socket, when you're on the underside of the tube socket, you count clockwise, and that is how you find the pin numbers. So you'd find the keyway. Here's a little easier way to look at it. See, the keyway is so this is the keyway right here. Here's our radio, and just determine which is so this is positive and that's negative, and so we shall hook these guys up in series. Start on one end, work your way down. Now I got them all plugged in. Here's my meter. So that's volts AC. That little wiggly line means AC. Volts DC, that means DC. Alternating current, switching directions. And then DC. That's DC, which is going the same direction. So I got, doesn't matter which way you go with the probes, but I'm gonna put this one on the black lead. And so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times 9 should be 56 volts. Let's see what we really get. So 65.7 volts. So in our desired voltage is 67.5 volts. That's good enough. That's pretty good. So let's see what we got going on here. So this is like, we're going to do this test for the first time. So we know that that is positive and that is negative. Just like 9-volt batteries are actually the same. So anyway, so this is negative. I'm just going to turn it on, turn it up all the way, and we got our 2 D cells are already installed in here. So the D cells for our A batteries have already been installed, and then I guess I'll get this clip lead right here, clip it on to our 65 volts on here, and I'll just touch it here and see what we get. I thought it would spring to life, but I was wrong. Oh, I don't hear anything. Alright. So I don't hear anything. I don't smell anything. Nothing seems to be melting yet. see if there's any current draw. Looks like there's no. Well, usually these things just spring to life. You get the enjoyment of AM radio right off the bat, but it doesn't seem to want to work. Well, the next thing one can do is you can test. The simplest thing you can do is test the heaters in the tubes. Since that didn't seem to work, what am I doing wrong? Am I forgetting something? Oh, I knew what I was forgetting something. Jam the plug in here like this. This is the switch, just like in the wave magnet. Jam the plug in. This little socket right here, and that should switch it over. So now it should be switched over to battery. Doesn't mean it's gonna mysteriously work for us, but let's see what we get. Oh, that's more like it. Sounds a lot more promising. Still pretty quiet though. Well, at least we know now we have it hooked up correctly. Wants to work. I wonder if maybe I'll just try it with AC and see what happens. Oh, also, I think sometimes, a lot of times, the switch in here gets kind of crusty. There's a multi-connection switch. Let's tear into this guy. So we're just going to take a look inside the chassis here of this guy. See what's going on. You never know if somebody's been in here and done some work or not. Yeah. Looks like somebody's been in here. Probably Seth from Mr. Radio has been in here from CHRS. So it probably works. He put in a nice, that's probably a 100 ohm big old ceramic 10 watt, probably a 100 ohm resistor. And there's yeah, it looks like Seth has been in here. Mr. Radio's been in here. He's really good. He's a lot better than I am. And that's probably a big 100 watt, 10 watt, 100 ohm ceramic resistor. There's the diode. There's probably a cross the line capacitor or something like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's one of the capacitors. He's also replaced the electrolytic capacitors with the proper value capacitors. It's interesting that it doesn't want to play on batteries, but it probably hasn't been asked to play on batteries in a very long time. And so that right there is that there's a lot of parts to that switch. So maybe I'll just hit it with a little bit of tuner cleaner, a little contact cleaner, and maybe that'll clear things up, because like that switch right there, it's kind of hard to see, but there it is I'm gonna jam the plug in. It turns that switch, but there's a lot going on there. There are many contacts. It's switching all of the A plus and B plus, the A battery and B battery from the power supply, switching it from the power supply with the electrolytic capacitors and that big white 10 watt, probably 100 ohm resistor to over to battery. So there's a lot of different connections to make. So let's see if I can just pickle it with some contact cleaner and see if life gets better for this radio. So I got some contact cleaner. Just gonna put way too much contact cleaner in there, and then let's see if that switch is even switching. Oh, it might not be switching. It's hard to tell. Yeah. Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. Anyway, that's the switch right there. And I'm just gonna turn it on and off a bunch of times. Probably won't matter, but hopefully I can convince it to work. It's kind of a brutal exercise, but it's just sort of the old thing where put some contact cleaner on something and then just turn it on and off and on and off. Do the same thing with volume controls. Turn them up and down and up and down. And the friction of whatever you're doing in combination with the contact cleaner, hopefully, I'm just going to try to do the same thing. No, can't get at it that way. Maybe that'll do something. I don't know. I didn't even turn it on and off that many times. But, let's see what we get. Put these batteries in. Again. See, that's positive, that's negative. There's negative. Positive. Seems about the same. I wonder why it's not. Well, I can barely hear a radio station. Very quiet, but it wants to work. I can hear radio stations very quiet. So now I've got it going. Try it on AC, and it still doesn't work right on AC. It just has a different set of weird characteristics. Doesn't even work as well as it did on battery. Doesn't even seem to work as well as it did on battery. But it makes a light humming staticky sound. So who knows what that means.